How's it going, everyone? This is Midnight Strike 3625, back again to continue on with our Trivium discography review by reviewing their 8th studio record, The Sin and the Sentence. Released in 2017, this album marks a massive return to form for the band after their lackluster reception of 2015's Silence in the Snow. Now, there are a lot of reasons why that album got the reception that it did, despite my opinion that it's actually a slightly good album. Now, in 2014, Matt Heafy blew out his vocal cords, ironically right after I saw them live, so he couldn't do any more screaming. As a result, the album cut all screaming and focused more on Matt Heafy's cleans. As I said in my What the Dead Men Say review, or will say if you're watching all these in order, that album actually had a very positive effect on it. So, by focusing more on Matt Heafy's clean vocals, he grew as a musician, and I believe that it features some of the best vocals as far as cleans go in Trivium's entire career, and it definitely set the stage for this album, The Sin and the Sentence, which features screaming once again. This album is also the first album since 2011's In Waves to feature blast beats, as well as the entry of drummer Alex Bent after the departure of Matt Madiro a couple years earlier than this. Now, they had another drummer in between. I believe it was a touring drummer. His name was Paul Wanke, but he didn't really do much with the band and departed after less than a year. So, to get into why this album is so good and what makes it such a basic masterpiece, to say the least, is the fact that it marks a huge, giant step up from Silence in the Snow, not only by bringing the complexity back of their earlier releases, but also focusing more on what made Ascendancy such a killer album. This album has a lot of reminiscence from albums such as Ascendancy, Shogun, and In Waves. In my opinion, the trifecta of Trivium releases prior to this album. It has the technicality of Shogun without going overboard as that album actually did. 7-minute guitar solos or whatever. I mean, some of that was just really overdone, and the band themselves said that they were just trying to prove to everyone how well they could play on that album, Shogun. Now, a lot of people really like that album. I myself am one of those people, but it definitely got a little bit long as far as the solos and the technical prowess went. Now, it takes a little bit on this album from Shogun, and a lot of the solos have that technical flair, but I think it's a little bit closer to if In Waves had a lot smoother production. In Waves is my favorite Trivium album, but it doesn't have very good production, and I gotta say that, because it sounds like it's a little bit washed out and thin on that end, but I think that's what the band was going for in terms of making sort of a melodic metalcore and a death metal album with all screaming and some screaming, and then there are some songs that don't have any screaming at all. It's kind of like that with this, actually, in the variety and the sheer complexity of the album. It has songs with no screaming, it has songs with screaming, but it doesn't really have songs that are all screaming, I suppose. But as far as the song structures go, there's a lot of variety to be had here, and this album actually takes a radio-friendly and popish direction without losing its edge or its heaviness. And I think that's probably one of the most admirable things about this album in Trivium's career. It doesn't sound like it's too edgy, but it takes more of an accessible approach, so people who may not have actually heard of Trivium or even liked Trivium before can actually find something that they enjoy on this record, especially with songs such as The Sin and the Sentence, The Heart from Your Hate, and Endless Night. Probably some of my favorite tracks on the album. With The Sin and the Sentence, the title track is one of my favorites, and another one that I have to bring up is Sever the Hand. It's got to be the heaviest track that Trivium has ever done. It's probably the most hardcore, and in the blast beat and breakdown section, it actually sounds like they blew out a couple of speakers when it comes to the production itself. It was still very, very staticky and fuzzy in some parts, and I think that adds a lot of character to the song, despite being a mar on the production side. Maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't, I don't know, but it's still one of my favorite songs in Trivium's entire career. This is definitely an album that everyone who is into Trivium needs to get. This is probably my third favorite Trivium album, and as I said before many times, a return to form for them after Silence in the Snow, but it takes what worked on Silence in the Snow and expands on it by adding elements of their previous albums. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone that this is basically all of Trivium's albums combined into one, because that is a trope and a stereotype and an overused statement that's pretty much used on every single album review, and I don't want to do that. I've done it before, only when it really matters, only when it's absolutely 100% true, but if I wanted to characterize this album and compare it to any one of Trivium's other releases, I would say if In Waves had sleek and heavy production and wanted to be more into a radio-friendly direction, I would say that this album is definitely a continuation of where In Waves would have led the band. So I would say that it's basically a progression from Vengeance Falls. Overall, I would give this album a 9.5, 9.6, 9.5 out of 10. We'll say 9.5 out of 10. This is my third favorite Trivium album, and it is absolutely 100% a must-get for any Trivium fan. So, that's pretty much all I have to say about this album. This is Midnight Strike 3625. Keep calm and rock on.